A global shift just exploded, and the U.S. is on the outside looking in. In a historic move, BRICS has officially banned the use of SWIFT within its member bloc. At the same time, China has taken an even more aggressive step, cutting off U.S. access to critical war metals, the same rare earth elements essential to defense systems, electric vehicles, and advanced tech. Combined, these actions have effectively locked the United States out of a $1.2 trillion 0 cents global supply chain. Washington is stunned, the Pentagon is scrambling, and Wall Street is in shock. This isn't just economic retaliation, it's a declaration of independence from the Western-led financial and industrial order. What happens next could rewrite the rules of global power. For decades, the United States held the keys to two of the most powerful systems on Earth, the global financial network and the industrial supply chains that fueled war, technology, and innovation. At the center of that control was SWIFT, the Belgium-based payment network that processed trillions of dollars in transactions daily. If a country was cut from SWIFT, it was effectively cut from global trade. But nations outside the West, especially within BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, never forgot how SWIFT was used as a weapon. When Russia was banned from the system after invading Ukraine, it sent a clear message to the rest of the world. Washington can turn off the lights on your economy overnight. At the same time, the U.S. quietly relied on a far more vulnerable foundation: access to rare earths and war metals controlled by China. These metals power everything from fighter jets to smartphones, from missile systems to clean energy tech. And China doesn't just mine them, it refines over 85% of the global supply. The West, distracted by cheap outsourcing and short-term gains, allowed Beijing to take control of materials essential to modern warfare. Over the years, BRICS watched and learned. They built their own financial tools, like China's CPIS, India's RuPay, and Russia's SPFS. They signed bilateral trade deals in local currencies. They reduced dependency on the dollar and quietly began hoarding strategic metals, lithium, and rare earths. Now, in 2025, the world is seeing the consequences. BRICS isn't just a political alliance. It's becoming a parallel world order with its own banks, currencies, and supply chains. And for the first time in modern history, the West is being locked out of the system it once controlled. The tipping point came suddenly, but it had been building for years. On July 20, 2025, the BRICS Alliance officially announced the launch of its own global payment system named BRICS PayNet, a fully operational, blockchain-based alternative to SWIFT. In the same statement, member nations confirmed they would no longer process international transactions through SWIFT for trade among themselves or with partner nations aligned with the BRICS bloc. But that wasn't all. In a synchronized move, China's Ministry of Commerce issued a sweeping export ban on 16 critical war metals and rare earth minerals, specifically targeting the United States, Japan, and NATO-aligned nations. These include neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, and gallium, materials essential for building radar systems, precision missiles, fighter jet engines, satellites, and advanced microchips. The ban came disguised as national security preservation, but the intent was unmistakable. China was weaponizing the very materials the U.S. defense sector cannot function without. Pentagon analysts quickly warned that even a 60-day disruption in supply could paralyze production of key defense systems. Simultaneously, BRICS central banks began offloading U.S. treasuries and converting reserves into gold and yuan. In Brazil, oil contracts were signed in renminbi. In India, payment channels with Russia began settling in rupees and rubles. A de-dollarized system wasn't just proposed, it was now live. In just 48 hours, the U.S. went from being the world's financial center to a spectator locked out of its own creation. SWIFT had been sidelined. War metals were blocked. Supply chains had been severed. What Washington once used to punish others was now being used against it. The backlash in the West was immediate and devastating. Within hours of the BRICS announcement, U.S. defense contractors saw their stocks nosedive. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman each lost billions in market value as investors realized the U.S. military supply chain had just been fractured at the core. In Washington, the Department of Defense issued an emergency statement, warning that production timelines for fighter jets, missile systems, and hypersonic weapons could be delayed by months, if not years. A senior Pentagon official reportedly called the Chinese metal ban the most dangerous chokehold on U.S. national security since the Cold War. Markets also trembled under the weight of a new reality. The dollar is no longer untouchable. As BRICS nations shifted settlements into local currencies and gold, the U.S. dollar index dropped sharply. Treasury yields spiked, and foreign central banks began reassessing their reserve portfolios. Meanwhile, American industries, from aerospace to clean tech, scrambled to find alternative suppliers. But the truth was unavoidable. China controls 85% of rare earth refining, and there's no replacement ready. The U.S. didn't just lose access to money or metals, it lost control. And for the first time in modern history, it has no immediate path to regain it. To understand BRICS' bold move, you need to understand what they fear and what they want. For years, the bloc has watched the U.S. wield swift and the dollar-like weapons. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the West froze hundreds of billions in reserves. When Iran pursued nuclear ambitions, sanctions crushed its economy. To BRICS, this wasn't policy, it was domination. China, in particular, has grown increasingly vocal about financial and resource sovereignty. Beijing has long warned its partners, if they can shut Russia out, they can do it to us next. The lesson was clear: dependency is vulnerability. That's why China spent years hoarding rare earths, subsidizing mining, and building out refining capacity. It wasn't just for profit. It was to create a weapon the West couldn't counter. And now, they've used it. By banning SWIFT and blocking war metals, BRICS has drawn a line in the sand, a message that the era of Western control is over. It's not just economic strategy, it's geopolitical rebalancing. They're not just resisting the US-led order, they're replacing it. What's happening isn't just about money or minerals. It's about the collapse of a global system. For over 70 years, the US dollar, SWIFT, and Western financial institutions formed the backbone of international trade. But now, for the first time, there's a credible alternative, and it's gaining ground fast. BRICS represents more than half the world's population, a rising share of global GDP, and now, control over key energy and industrial resources. By creating a separate financial and supply chain ecosystem, they're building a world where the West is no longer the gatekeeper. The implications are enormous. Sanctions could become useless. Dollar demand could collapse. Western tech, defense, and energy sectors may face shortages and production bottlenecks. This isn't a challenge. It's a restructuring. And the U.S., once the architect of globalization, is now being written out of its own blueprint. The world has crossed a threshold, and there's no going back. BRICS is no longer a sleeping giant. It's an active force reshaping global power. With SWIFT rejected and war metals weaponized, the message is clear. The U.S. is no longer in control. The question now is, can Washington adapt? Will it rebuild domestic supply chains, create new alliances, or attempt to retaliate? Because one thing is certain, this is not just a shift. It's a seismic break. And the longer the West waits to respond, the more ground it loses. The global order is being rewritten, and this time, America may not have the pen.